Let's get started. Welcome again. My name is Beth Solin. I'm the founder and the director of Multisolving Institute. I'm here today with the full Tiny But Mighty Multisolving Institute team. So with me is Kelsey Eccles, who's our engagement manager, and Stephanie McCauley, who's our chief operating officer. And Stephanie and Kelsey are going to be helping wherever help is needed. So you can always ask them a question in the chat. And they're going to be helping with a lot of the interactive sessions that we're going to do today. So welcome. We're really excited to have you here. While we are still waiting for the few people who are jumping from one meeting to this one, we thought we'd take a minute and tell you about some new things coming up at Multisolving Institute we're excited about. We have more webinars coming. One in May called the Multisolving Way, which is focused on the attitudes and approaches and best practices that our research has identified in multisolvers. We're going to have another webinar on flower in June. So if you like this one or you want to send a colleague, keep your eye out for that. In November, we're very excited to announce the release of my book on multisolving. You can actually pre-order it now, and Stephanie or Kelsey can put the link for that in the chat if you're super excited by that vibrant colored cover like me. And we're planning to have the tool you're going to see today available on our website early this summer. So for all of that, the best way to find out the details is to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already, and we'll put the link for that in the chat. You can also follow us on social media. We're just at Multisolving on most of those channels. So here's the plan for today. It's going to be 90 minutes, interactive, fast-paced. I'll apologize ahead of time. We're probably always going to move on faster than you would like. Each part of what we're going to do today, you could probably spend an hour doing, but we want to give you a taste of a lot of aspects of flower. We're going to do part of that in a role-playing exercise where we'll invite you to step outside of your day-to-day and think about a multi-solving question from another point of view. Then we'll do a deep dive into some other features of flower, and we'll have time for your questions. We're doing this as a Zoom meeting, so we can be more interactive, but it will help a lot if you can keep your microphones muted. And we will be recording the webinar, so we wanted to make sure that you knew about that. One of the ways that we're going to be interactive today is we're going to use some polling software called Poll Everywhere, and we're going to jump right into that and do a poll, partly to see who's here and partly just so that everybody has the Poll Everywhere working. So we'll put the link in the chat. You can also use the QR code on my slide here, so I'll leave it up for just a couple seconds if you want to grab that. And the first question for Poll Everywhere is just, where are you today? And the way that we're going to look at that is here on this map of planet Earth. Find your spot and drop a pin, and that will let everybody know where you are. And in a lighthearted way, you'll notice the map is different than we usually look at it. We wanted to do that for fun, but also to warm us up, because one thing about multi-solving is it really requires us to look at problems differently. So this can be the first warm-up step for that. So I'm seeing lots of dots in North America, one or two dots across Europe, Eurasia. We know time zones make some things more feasible than others, but you're all welcome, and we're super happy to have you here with those bright green dots of multi-solvers around the world. Up there, we've got a tip of Africa, somebody in Australia. I don't want to know what time it is there. Welcome everybody. And if you're having any trouble with Poll Everywhere, just let Stephanie or Kelsey know in the chat. But I see lots of dots, so it makes me feel optimistic that it's working. All right, so we're going to keep going here. From where are we to what are we? We're here to talk about multi-solving. And at the Institute, we define multi-solving as using one investment of time or effort to solve for several goals at once. So a classic example is weatherizing homes to reduce energy use, CO2 production, but also to make the homes healthier to provide good jobs for the people doing that work, to reduce energy bills, and a whole host of other things. So that's multi-solving. For us, in the way we think of it at the Institute, there's two other factors that are as important. One is an attention to equity. The best multi-solving makes our systems more equitable. And the third is the spirit, or sometimes the worldview within which a project takes place. We are really looking at projects that operate out of a web of relationship worldview. That means just recognizing how we're all connected to one another and to the earth, and that our solutions going forward need to really honor that relationship. So that's multi-solving, and I bet that many of you are either multi-solving or have examples in your community that you know about. And the best way really to understand multi-solving is to look at those examples. So we are going to quickly go to Poll Everywhere again. Here we go to the next poll question. And here we'd like you just to use a few words, a phrase, some examples of multi-solving in your work, in your community, in your scholarship, something that you study. Those are all open, and it'll just help us build a richer picture of what multi-solving can be. So find your way there and type in your examples. No example is too small or too big. Tree canopy expansion, love it. That provides shade, potentially biodiversity. The mental health benefits of trees in cities are incredible, as a lot of you know. Improving public transportation, permaculture in the context of community. Electric school buses and edible chestnut project. I wonder if that's one thing or two. I would love it if it was the edible chestnuts electric school bus. Increasing using renewable resources, urban water challenges, clean energy transition while keeping utility bills affordable, tree canopy, prioritizing lower income areas. So that's a great example of what I was saying about the importance of equity. The intersection of equity, mental health, and climate change, plant-based eating at home, which we know has health impacts as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions from food. Planting gardens to beautify space, improve air quality, energy efficiency, and healthy housing for all. Great. Active travel. You all can keep them going. And as I said, we're going to be moving fast. So I'm going to go back to the slides, but we'll capture all that you send us. Let's see. So at Multisolving Institute for almost a decade now, we have been studying multi-solving. We have been doing interviews of multi-solvers. We've been working with multi-solving partners on the ground. We've been quantifying multi-solving. We've been creating case studies about it. And if you go to the publications and press sections of our website, all these little snapshots you see here are there if any of those capture your interest. But the main thing that we want to say right now is just that we come to believe that the people who are doing multi-solving are working in a different way. They need tools for the way that they work. So we feel that multi-solvers, it's challenging enough, this work that straddles many silos and many sectors. But then to be having to do this challenging work with tools that by and large are meant just for people who are working within one or maybe two silos or sectors at a time is sort of an additional burden placed on multi-solvers. And part of our mission at Multisolving Institute is to do something about that. We are so enthralled and impressed and amazed, honestly, by the work that multi-solvers are doing. And we want them to have the best possible tools to do that. So today, we are going to very quickly look at one of our offerings that we hope will make the work of multi-solving a little bit easier. But before we do that, we have one last poll for the moment, where we really want to actually hear from you. We have our own thoughts from all those years of research and study about what the most important and biggest challenges are to multi-solvers. But we would really like to hear what what you would say they are. And so we've named a whole bunch here of the ones that come up again and again in our interviews. In this case, you can pick 3. So maybe read the list and then figure out what the biggest 3 are for you. And like I said, we haven't asked this question before. Not sure what answer we expected, but we'll see if any patterns emerge or if anything hops out to us as the most important. So I'm seeing cultivating relationships as a big one. Also, if you see something that's not on our poll, but you want to add it in the chat, that would be great. That would be good information for us to have as well. So really interesting to me if we have a bit of a leader here in cultivating relationships across silos. And then to me, it looks like almost all the rest are like, yeah, this one matters too, and that one and that one. And maybe that's not surprising if we're doing this complex work in complex systems. There's a lot of things that we need to attend to all at the same time. So thanks for giving us your thoughts on that. And I'm going back to my slides again. To move into talk about Flower, which, as I said, is a tool that we're really hoping will address many of the needs on that list. So what is Flower? Well, it's an acronym, first of all. It stands for the Framework for Long-Term Whole System Equity-Based Reflection. So it looks like a flower, but it also names some of the most important elements of multi-solving. And we want to really give you a sense of what you can do with Flower today. And the way that we thought we would do that, I mentioned at the outset, a sort of simple and lighthearted role playing that we hope you'll just join in the spirit of with us. And so with the power vested in me, I would like to welcome you to the city of Greenfield, an imaginary US city, and to the Greenfield Citizen Climate Assembly, where you're going to have a few tasks over the next half hour or so. Your first task, given that you represent citizens from all segments of Greenfield, is to work together in small groups to build on 3 initial ideas that have to do with a recently acquired parcel of land that's near the center of the city. And we're going to use the Flower tool to support you as a citizen assembly as you make some recommendations about this parcel of land. You're being tasked by the mayor, and she has 2 goals that are really important for you to keep in mind. Her first goal is to reduce the city's carbon footprint. And her second goal is to do that in a way that meets other needs that community-based organizations across Greenfield have identified. And I have a summary for you of those other needs. So 3 of them come from a community-based organization, the Greenfield Community Association, who did a needs assessment recently. And they identified a top priority is improving health and reducing chronic illness in Greenfield, and particularly in the neighborhood that surrounds this parcel of land. They named 2 other goals, increasing a sense of community and connection in Greenfield and providing more well-paying jobs. Greenfield also has a very active conservation commission, and they have one top priority conservation goal, which is to protect native pollinators in the city. So those are the goals that the mayor wants you to take to heart. And to help you do this, I'm going to switch my screen to the Flower tool, and we're going to go to this view of Flower called Assess Need. Across everything we'll do in Flower, you're going to be working with 8 types of benefits across the top here. So there's jobs and livelihoods, resilience, the built environment, which includes housing, mobility, energy, infrastructure, food and water, climate protection, biodiversity, health and well-being, and connection. So what we do in this view of Flower is we're able to indicate for the particular community we're working in or the particular region, what are the most important priorities. So I told you the mayor's top priority was climate protection. I told you that the community-based organization is highlighting the importance of jobs. Their top goal was health and well-being, and then connection, you might think of that as social cohesion, was another goal they named. And the Conservation Commission is really prioritizing biodiversity in the form of protecting native pollinators. Now, this is a good example of how what we're going to do today is going really quickly, but for any of you who work with communities, imagine you had an hour or a morning with a group of different stakeholders to figure out where to set these sliders. So hopefully you're getting the sense that if I raise this little button higher, it means higher priority. If I bring it down, it means lower priority. Each of these 8 sliders is a conversation, is a way to reach consensus, and is an opportunity for someone who's all about the native pollinators maybe to understand why jobs really matter in this neighborhood too, by getting to know someone who's an advocate for that better. So for all of this, we're really trying to promote conversation and keep that in mind as you get a sense of what flower can do. So that's step 1 with flower. What are your instructions? So the previous work on this project has identified 3 initial ideas, and your job is to take these ideas further with flower. So the 3 are using the parcel to install some walking paths to connect outlying neighborhoods with the city center, or installing a solar array, or using the land for community gardens. What you're going to do in your small groups in just a few minutes is you're going to land on a blank worksheet that looks like this. This one's an example. You're going to see all the flower co-benefits down the side. And what you need to do in your group is for each of these benefits, ask yourself if whatever investment you're analyzing will make it better, make it worse, because some things have trade-offs, or have no impact. And put an X in whichever box you think is right. We'd love a few words about your reasoning, like why did you choose connection? So in this example, we're doing a farmer's market, a 4th idea for the parcel. The group who did this thought that would make connection better. And their reason was residents would connect as they're shopping, and it would also maybe connect customers with farmers and where their food comes from. Over here, you'll have a blank section. That's where you can write any notes about additional thoughts you want the mayor's team to think about. So in this case, these folks said a farmer's market could help biodiversity if you follow their idea, which is, what if farmers had to pledge to not use pesticides on their field in order to qualify to be vendors at the farmer's market? So this is really your space to add any nuance that you want to the example. Here's how it's going to work. In just a minute, Kelsey's going to send you all into small groups. If you would choose one person who's willing to share their screen so everyone can see it at the same time. We're also going to give you a link, which is going to take you to Google Slides, which are your worksheet. And if each group would choose a timekeeper, you're going to have 15 minutes. So when you get there, we want you to get oriented to your resources. This page is the first page of your workspace. There's the community goals are repeated. If you have any questions like, well, what is biodiversity or resilience? What does that really mean? There's a page with definitions. There's this example worksheet, the one we were just looking at. That's in your workspace. And then from page 5 and on, there will be blank worksheets. And how you're going to know which worksheet to work in is to look up here in the corner. Here where it says example, it's going to say things like breakout group 2 or breakout group 8. So when you get sent to Zoom, you want to remember the number of the group you're being sent to and go to that page in the slide deck. And that's where your small group will fill out your answers, okay? We're going to come back in 15 minutes, and we're going to use the worksheets that you've filled out over here in Flower. We're going to go to a different view of Flower, where for each of the 8 benefits, we can do things like make petals that are going to show the benefits that you think a particular innovation is going to create. And I'll explain more about how to interpret the flower diagram, but to give you a sense of where all that work is going, that's what you're going to do. So the next slide, and we'll give you a minute to make sure that everyone can get there. This link is important. We need at least one person in your group who's going to share their screen to be on this page before we go to the breakout groups. So Kelsey or Stephanie's putting the link in the chat. You can just click on it and get to the Google Slides. You can use the QR code. You could type this in to a browser tab. And I'm going to go to the workspace, and Great. So all these little anonymous animals are telling us that people are finding their way there. So Kelsey, let's give it like 30 seconds. And then I think we can send people to small groups.
Thanks, Beth. Sounds good. And we've got a total of 8 breakout groups that we will have, and about 5 or 6 participants will be in each room. So with that,
Perfect.
I'm going to go ahead and sort everyone to a breakout room.
Great. Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope that was some good stimulating conversation. It looked like the cursors were flying as we were watching the workspace from back here in the main room. I should have told you before we sent you off that we've never done this before. This was a big experiment. So thank you for just engaging willingly with us in different ways to try and be a virtual group, but have some meaningful conversations together. And we'd love to hear how it went. If any of you want to let us know in the chat or later on. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we're going to build 3 flowers. We're going to build a flower for each of your groups. And so the first one we're going to tackle is the bikes. So that was a group. We had to go to the workspace. That was this group. I think we had 3 groups that did bikes. So group 1, group 4, and I think group 7. So thank you. And I think that we're not gonna, so remembering back to what I said at the beginning, we're gonna have to go through things quickly. I can already see there's some fascinating differences in how 3 groups thought about the same problem. A lot of it obviously having to do with, we didn't give you much detail and you're raising these really important conversations. So again, imagine this exercise instead of 15 minutes, you had the ability to bring these 3 groups back and we could hear the different questions and the different lines of thinking. So I'm going to say it again because it's so important to us. Like that is the point of Flower. We're going to make some cool diagrams, but the point is the conversations that happen along the way. So let's look at breakout group 7. I just ended up here on this one. They thought that there were things that would get better, including connection, resilience, mobility in the face of disruption. There was a famous example in Mexico City after an earthquake where walking and cycling were critical for both food and people and first aid getting around. So I really agree with that one. Built environment, land can't be used for housing. So you're talking about a trade-off between mobility and housing, and that really important one to have more conversation about. Food and water might depend. Climate protection, so more cycling means less greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. Improvement in health and well-being from exercise. Okay, so we're going to try and capture that as quickly as we can in Flower. So we heard connection, like moving through a neighborhood at the speed of foot or bike. We heard health from that group, and I bet the other groups said this too. So more active mobility means just more exercise. We said climate protection. So what you can see as I move these sliders is that these petals are getting bigger if there's more benefit. Notice when I make them smaller or when I go downward, the petal turns black, and that's true for any of the petals in Flower. So think about it as color means benefit and black means burden. Okay, so I'm going to put these back. We said there was some health improvement. We said that there was climate protection. That group talked about resilience. So I'm going to show resilience there. And I got to refresh my memory for things that we thought would get better. Health, climate, food and water was a maybe, so I'm going to leave that out. Built environment gets better because of mobility. And then there's a gets worse, potentially, biodiversity. So we're maybe making land less hospitable for biodiversity, even while making it better for walking and cycling. So for biodiversity, we're going to have somewhat worse. And for built environment, we're going to make it somewhat better. Okay, so there's a start at a flower to represent that one group. And if we had time, it would be cool to make flowers for each of the other groups, but mostly we want you to see how flower works. So I'm going to add a second flower. And what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to look at the group that did the solar array. But before that, I want to show you one more thing about flower, which is this button called Needs Match. So remember, the very first thing we did was we made a specific profile for this community of what their priorities were. So Flower, the tool, is doing some simple math, comparing the benefits created to what those benefits needed were. You can think of like, how well does this deliver what the people in the neighborhood say they need? The way it works is as the match gets better and better, this score will get bigger and bigger. So remember, the mayor had a priority for climate. So if we go to the bike flower again, and we make the climate protection, oh wait, in the wrong flower. If we make climate protection bigger, so look at this number, 32, it was about 30. If we make it bigger, 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 that number goes up. If climate protection actually gets worse, you see the number going down. So that is, that's a rough measure, one way to think about and compare flowers. So having shown you that, we're going to go back to the workspace, and I'm going to kind of at random pick a group. This group has lots of ifs. That's great. It tells me you had a really good conversation. So connection might get worse with a solar array. A no-go area in the middle of the geography, it could separate people. Yeah, I remember how in the 70s highways divided cities. We sure don't want to do that same thing with our solar, do we? So we're going to take the connection, we're going to go to flower 2, be in the right place. Connection might get a little bit worse. Jobs could get better if employed, if the money goes into the community. So lots of ifs, and keep those in mind because we're going to go more with some of these ifs in the next section. Resilience, if there is battery backup and private networks. So it really, they're saying it really depends on the design. But let's go with those ifs. Let's say it's a good design. So there's jobs, resilience, and climate protection. So we're going to go back to flower. We're going to go to jobs. We're going to add some resilience, and we're going to add some climate protection. And I noticed this group also had some things that might get worse. I guess we did that one. Biodiversity might get worse, and a couple that would stay the same. So we won't move those flowers. And now we have the last one to do is the community gardens. So let's look at breakout group 6. They thought there would be one thing would stay the same, potentially jobs, but connection, resilience, pretty much all the other things, if it was designed well, could stay the same, or sorry, could improve. I'm kind of curious if other groups agreed. Here's another one. Yeah, those line up pretty well. That's interesting. And maybe there's only 2. Okay, so it looks like we want a flower with all the benefits except for jobs. So we're going to add another flower. You can add up to 5 of these as you picture how you might use it in your work. So I'm just going to quickly, food and water is something that's going to come from a community garden. There we go. Resilience, I imagine what they're thinking about there is just local food isn't as subject to disruptions of supply chains. Health and well-being, access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Biodiversity probably matters a lot on how the gardens are managed. So another one of those if statements that people were adding, and connection. Certainly people being out there growing food together is a great way to foster connection. Okay, so again, we could have compared those flowers. We could have spent all of our time really honing in on the perfect representation, but let's just see if we compare. We've got a kind of a diversity. We've got in the middle, maybe in terms of matching the needs, kind of mid-range score. Not so sure about the solar array. Community garden looks pretty interesting and pretty exciting for the neighborhood. So that is showing you, at least at the first glance, kind of how flower can work. And we thought it would be fun, just based on that, to see if out of those 3, there's one that you really think the mayor's team should look into more. So we're going to do a quick poll, and then we're going to dive deeper into some more features of what you can do with flour. But I'm going to take us to the poll and get to the right question. There you go. Okay, hopefully you all can see that. Yeah, so here you should only be able to make one vote. And really the question is just if this was your city, which example would you really want the mayor's team to dive into more? And it looks like maybe people were persuaded by the diversity of benefits in the community gardens, although there's definitely a faction that wants walking and biking. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if you really had people with flower and enough time that they might ask why you couldn't have white walking and biking paths that go through a community garden. So again, one of the things that will make us happiest about flower is if it helps people discover these kinds of synergies. Okay, so in line with that, keeping it moving, we're gonna keep going and stay in this theme for a little while. We're not going to do any more small groups, but stay in this theme of advising the mayor of this imaginary city. It turns out the mayor campaigned on increasing equity in Greenfield. And this parcel is located in a neighborhood that has had historic disinvestment. And so what we want to think about is what are policies that have to do with how the project is implemented that could improve the equitability of all of these investments? Because our time is short, we're just going to try it on one. We're going to try it on the cycling proposal. But here's an example of what we're looking for. Imagine that if the plan for cycling included support for a worker-owned bike repair shop located in the neighborhood, and maybe if that were to train young people into the skills of running a business as well as the skills of caring for bikes. There's a way to bring some economic opportunity into a neighborhood that's been disinvested. So we really want to turn on our creativity. At Multisolving Institute, we say that equity doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. So how can we take any of these ideas and design them for equity? I'm going to show you in flower, and then we're going to tackle or have a chance to hear your ideas. I'm going to focus us back just on the first flower. So this was our biking flower. And that idea actually said maybe there could be some jobs. I'm gonna add a jobs benefit here, some jobs repairing bikes. Now I'm gonna move, we've been in what we call the basic mode of flower. I'm gonna go to the advanced mode, which lets us do a few more things. First thing you'll notice is all those colors turned a little bit more muted. So we use the intensity of shading to talk about the equity of each benefit and just focus on the jobs benefit. It's sort of a mid-range dark blue. I'm moving this slider labeled equity for jobs, and you should see that petal getting darker and darker. Okay, so the way you read the equity feature of flower, the fainter it is, the less equitable. That means a policy that benefits those who are already advantaged in some way. Darker and darker means it benefits people who may have been historically excluded. So that idea about a worker co-op for bike repair, that would, to my mind, would improve the equity of the jobs benefit. It may not change the health benefit or the mobility benefit. So that's one thing we're really happy about in flower is it allows this resolution to think about equity benefit by benefit, because it doesn't always move all at the same time. So back to your question, your task in the next couple minutes is on this slide, suggest policies that improve the equitability of each investment. So we're going to go back here to the next poll, which will just allow you to type in a word or a phrase. What policies could help the cycling investment increase equity in Greenfield? So think about all those different benefits, right? There's the health benefit. How do you make sure the people in the neighborhood benefit from the access to healthy physical activity? There was the mobility benefit. So where are the routes located, right? Make used bikes available through high schools. Yeah, so there's the financial barrier to actually having a bicycle. It doesn't do you a great deal of good to have a bike path if you can't afford a bike. free bikes to kids in the neighborhood and free repair, right? So there could be all sorts of different ways to subsidize access or to improve access to this investment. I hadn't thought about that one. Classes to help ride a bike. Like not everyone might have learned how to ride a bike. So that's sort of capacity building. Locate the repair shop in a school or a community college. Workforce training, make sure the routes are wide enough to support adaptable bikes and wheelchairs. So there you're talking about accessibility when it comes to physical disability, bike storage and security. But yeah, these are great. So keep them coming. I want to go back to Flower and just pop in a couple that I can remember. So that there were 3 or 4 of them that just had to do with making bikes accessible and affordable. And the interesting thing about that is that that's going to improve the equity for a couple dimensions, right? If everyone can get better access to a bike, then that health benefit becomes more equitable, but the mobility benefit would at the same time. The idea of making sure the paths are wide enough for different adaptable types of bicycles, that makes say the mobility benefit even more accessible. Right now it's accessible to another group of people. Maybe we would decide to move that slider up a little bit further. So if we had more time, we could do the same exercise on the other 2 flowers to think about ways to improve the equitability there. Another thing we could do is replicate the flower for biking, but look at a couple different dimensions of equity. Maybe the same policy that improves racial equity doesn't help with gender equity or equity based on physical capability. So we want people to be able to really parse and have more rigorous conversations about equity. And we're really feeling hopeful that this flexible interface of Flower can help promote that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts when we get to the more open discussion part in just a bit. So we're doing pretty well here on time. I want to talk about your third and final task. You are a loyal community task force. I hope you're not getting too tired yet. This is the third task. For all these ideas that you've been sharing, the truth is the mayor doesn't have enough money to fully develop them. Like there's not enough allocated budget yet. Some city departments are already on board, but if there was more support, a lot more could be accomplished. So we're going to take just one proposal and we're going to stick with the cycling one. We want to show you how you might use Flower to start thinking about what are other partners who could help this work proceed. So currently, the Mayor's Climate Office is on board with the bike idea, and the Department of Public Works is putting some capacity on the table. So let's see how we might represent that in Flower. There's this third table called funding, or third tab called funding source. We think of that not only as dollars, but also capacity. It could be volunteer hours. So we said that the Office of Climate is in support of this project. So we're going to go to the climate pedal again and watch what happens as I move this slider up. You see the dollar sign here getting bigger or smaller. So that's just a way to recognize, to indicate which sectors are putting effort into making this possibility come to fruition. So we said the Department of Public Works, I think of them as probably under the built environment. And so what we have is this host of benefits. And so far at this early stage of the project, we have the core support coming from two of the pillars. And so the question the mayor is really asking is, what types of organizations within the community, in state government and beyond, what interests really ought the mayor's team be reaching out to find more support for this project? Like who should come to the next meeting? Who might want to make this a reality? So we're going to go to poll everywhere. I hope that question is clear, and go to the next question and just have you give us some suggestions there. What other types of organizations should the mayor reach out to based on what you just saw in the flower? The question you might ask yourself is, where are there places where there's benefit happening, but so far investment not happening? So foundations, transportation department, local conservation groups. So we were worried actually about biodiversity, but maybe there's a way to combine biodiversity. Companies that manufacture bikes, local bike riding groups, schools, yep. Youth employment, right, absolutely, because we said there was the potential for youth jobs, neighborhood associations, um, disability communities and committees and organizations, permaculture. I was really thinking along the lines of health, right? We know the health benefits of active transportation. So far in the way we've set up this scenario, there isn't actually any health dollars on the table to create an amenity which really could boost health. Faith communities, great. So that's what this last tab called funding source is really about in Flower, is to set people up for that conversation of who else might want to be involved in supporting this work. And this comes from years of us watching multi-solving programs evolve on the ground. Usually it's it's usually founded by a few partners who widen the sphere of who's involved. So this aspect of Flower is our hope as a way to help make that easier. That sort of critical conversation easier. All right, so that was the last of your 3 tasks. Give yourselves a silent and virtual round of applause. Thank you for your service as part of the Mayor's Citizen Climate Assembly, but also from Kelsey, Stephanie, and me, just thank you for going along with our role-playing idea. And I hope it helps you imagine how you might use Flower in your own contexts a little bit. So we wanted to even a little bit more quickly talk about 2 additional features of Flower because we think you'll be interested in them. And then we can turn to a few final topics and some questions and answers. I know it's the top of the hour and some people may have to leave. So if that's true, I just want to thank you very much for your participation so far. And there'll be a recording and other ways to catch up if you miss anything. But if you can stay, these next 2 features are pretty cool. And I'm excited to share them with you. But I need to do that, not here, but in Flower itself. We're going to go back to the benefits view. And I want to talk about the size of the petals for a minute. So some of you, I imagine, were noticing that I was pretty much dodging the question of how much benefit for each of these projects. So we signify how much benefit by the size of the petal, but how do you know where to set that, right? None, somewhat, significantly. And again, because conversation is our main purpose with Flower, what we really hope to have people doing is to be talking with each other about why I think this is a significant benefit to the built environment and why you might think it's just marginally better. And you may or may not be able to resolve that question in the moment, but we hope it will lead you to a clearer question, a research task for before your next meeting. And that's because these benefits are not all going to be created equal. And figuring out which benefits are the ones that you most want is one part of the equation, and which solutions are going to produce the most benefit is the other part. Maybe one way to make that even maybe a little more vivid in the examples that we've been using. So I've brought back our flowers from before. Remember, this is the biking, this is the solar array, this is the community gardens. And because I was moving fast and set the sliders the same, you see the climate petal for the community gardens, the climate petal for bike lanes is kind of the same size. But from my understanding, people who work on the greenhouse gas emissions from the food sector, transportation is actually kind of a small wedge, and much more matters about how that food is grown. And so the argument probably would be, when it comes to climate protection, maybe that petal should be, whoops, flower 3, climate protection, I'm in the wrong place. Maybe that climate petal should be a little smaller. On the other hand, greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, which is what Flower One is about, that's pretty significant part of a city's profile of greenhouse gases. So maybe we would actually stretch that one a little bit bigger. I will tell you one of our secret dreams, and we're really looking for the funding partner to make the secret dream happen, is to not leave communities on their own in answering this question. Like parts of this are knowable, not everything, but parts. There is data. There's nothing about the modeling structure of Flower that would keep us from linking that data in. What we need is the team of researchers with the time to basically build the database that would support, so that conversation is great, but sometimes you want an arbiter to help resolve that conversation. And we would like Flower to be able to do that, but we can't yet, and it's on our path of development. So that's one feature of Flower that we wanted to show before we end. And the last one, I'm going to make a new Flower window here so that we don't lose the others. So just let me close a few windows. Some of you might have noticed down here this feature called Animate Benefits. When I push Animate, what happens, this counter is running from year 0 to year 20. And we added this feature because one thing about multisolving is the benefits don't all arrive at the same time. Some things happen quickly. If you shut down a coal-fired power plant, the air gets better pretty quickly. But the climate benefit of replacing that with clean energy unfolds much more slowly. So we wanted people to begin to grapple with the question of when do benefits arrive? And that matters because of the kind of patience we need to cultivate for multisolving. For these benefits that arrive slowly, we need people to be prepared for it. The city isn't going to get cooler next year just because we planted some saplings this year. The greenhouse gas emissions aren't going to drop immediately, or you're not going to see that benefit to the climate immediately. So what we ask people, again, we're supporting a conversation by having people think about 2 questions for each benefit. When would it start to show up? And when would it reach its full impact? And once you've answered those questions, you can push Animate and you can see the Flower basically unfold. So I'm not going to take the time to ask all of those questions. What I'm going to do is load a Flower that I created this morning. And I was picturing something like an urban forestry project when I thought about this. So there's some connection, there's jobs because we're planting a lot of trees, there's resilience because we're fighting the urban heat island effect, we're helping with climate, biodiversity, and health. And I made some guesses, just one person sitting at the computer by herself, about the timing of that. But imagine your urban forestry team really delving in and answering those questions. And you could have an animated Flower, which looks like this. So before I push run, think about what benefits you think will come quickly and what ones more slowly, and try to kind of mentally simulate the Flower emerging. Right. So if you have it, I'm gonna push animate. So jobs come first, connection, health starts to improve, resilience, biodiversity, climate, like those trees have to grow before those things happen. And so those are appearing more slowly. And it would be great if you argued with me, right? If you were like, no, the jobs are going to take 5 years, and I think they're going to take 2. And that leads us to, well, what do we need to do to design our program so those jobs come as quickly as possible? Or how do we need to prepare people for the fact that our city is going to stay pretty warm for the next 5 years, and maybe we need something to supplement that tree canopy work? Those are the types of conversations that we hope to be inspiring. We have one more poll about, and it's actually kind of a reprise of a poll from before, because now you've seen Flower. It's the same list of questions that we asked you about. What are the obstacles you face? But we'd be really curious, what are the top 3 things with the glimpse of Flower you've had today that you think Flower could be helpful with? And you should be able to choose 3 different things. Great. Seeing the big picture, identifying synergies, avoiding places where improvements in one place make things worse in another. Cultivating relationships, I'm really happy to hear that. Um, Tracking impact, harder to see how flower could do that. We have some ideas, but I didn't show those to you today. Quantifying benefits, that's this last point about how big to make each petal. And I agree that that's on the big flower to-do list, basically. Great. So if you haven't voted, this will still be open and you can take a minute, but I'm going to take us back to the slides for just a couple more things, and then I'm looking forward to opening this up. So we talk at Multisolving Institute, we talk about multisolving as being a what and a way. And with Flower, for the last little more than an hour, we've been talking about the what. We're talking about bike lanes and solar panels and community gardens, and that is really critical, but it's only a part of the multisolving picture. And we think of that here in this, we talk about it as a dandelion, okay? And we think the most obvious parts are what people are doing and what's happening because of what they're doing, okay? So we're doing a lot of planning and permitting, and then we're going to construct a bike lane. Then we have a bike lane, we have reduced emissions, and we have people getting healthier, and there's 27 new jobs. And for a lot of the world, including nonprofits and community groups and funders, this is kind of all of the diagram, all of the picture that people see. But we know that that's not all there is. On the one hand, there's all kinds of ripples that emanate out of that work. Yeah, there were five high school sophomores who got trained to repair bikes. They also learned how worker cooperatives operate. And then one of them started a new worker cooperative that's grown to employ 15 people, 10 years later. That's a ripple of impact that for sure this project contributed to. But because it's more distant in time and space, which is a characteristic of complex systems, it's harder for people to see. So one thing that we try to do at Multisolving Institute is draw attention to what you might anticipate about these ripples, and how to notice they happen for your own learning and for making the case for investing in your work. The other part of multisolving that's really not visible to most people, we think of it as below the surface. And that's building the relationships and the capacity to act in these moments of opportunity to find these synergistic solutions. That's building a shared understanding of a complex system. It's building trusting relationships. It's learning together. It's figuring out how to trust one another well enough to share resources. And without the action going on below the surface, our view is that what happens above the surface is far less powerful than it could be, let alone the ripples of impact. But for those of you who've been doing this work for a long time, my guess is you'll agree with me that this might be vital, but it's also some of the hardest work to fund and find support for. It's even hard for the people doing the work to register sometimes that it is work. There's no shovels, it's whiteboards and listening and so on. And it's not as apparent, but we think it's critical. And Multisolving Institute, the what and what we talked about in Flower is really important to us, but it's only really half of what we think is critical. The other half is this wider picture of the way of accomplishing multisolving. And over the years, we've come to think of this in 5 different critical practices, essential practices that we see in successful multisolving at all different scales in all different sectors. And we could have, and we will actually next month, have a whole webinar just focused on our understanding of these 5 capacities. For now, I'll just name them: a systems view, working with coherence, which has to do with aligning around values and vision and simple rules. Connection, we've been talking really through this webinar about that capacity to stretch across all the silos that divide us to take action for the common good. Equity, which we think of as disrupting patterns of domination and strengthening patterns of care and collaboration. And foresight, just for designing this work, not for the world that was behind us or even the world of today, but for the tumultuous future that is coming, both preparing for unexpected shocks, but also unexpected opportunities. So we see multisolvers doing all of these things. And part of our mission is to share what we've learned in ways that we hope could strengthen the work of people like you. All right, we showed this slide at the beginning, just a reminder, more webinars coming, including one on the multi-solving way. So I should say again, this is what we consider the multi-solving way, this picture, below the surface, obvious parts, ripples, and the 5 practices that support all of that. We'll have another webinar on flower in June. It'll be a little different based on what we learned today, but send along anybody you think would be interested. Multi-solving book, which is full of both the what and the way, and flower coming before too long, hopefully in order to strengthen and support your own work. There's one request we have of you. This is the #1 most important way you could help us, which is if you see potential in flower to lift up your own work, please let us know, especially if you're willing to have that attributed to you. What we really need to do in this moment is thank the funders who've gotten us this far and find the funders who can take flower to the next level. So an easy way to do that, we'll send out a short survey with some follow-up after this webinar. If you want to offer any testimonials like that there, that would be great, or feel free to email me or our general account info@multisolving.org. Beyond that, and really the most important thing is just to say thank you for your time and for your attention. I saw lots of names of dear friends and supporters, and then lots of folks I haven't met yet, but thank you all for your time and for being here. And I'm also happy to open this up for any questions about flower, about the work of the Institute. And I think the best way to manage that is if you write your thoughts into the chat. Kelsey can help me with answering those. And I'm going to stop sharing and be able to see you all better and see what you have for questions.
Beth, before we open it up, there was one question that came up in the chat from Christy Clay that I thought was really interesting. And that question was, how can we help make these quantitative and qualitative data-driven conversations when using flower?
Yeah, that is it's probably like the question. I was going to say it's a great question, but it is one of the most important questions for us. I think there's as many ways to do that as there are people to use flower, and I'm not dodging the question when I say that. We had, as you can imagine, creating any kind of a tool like this, there's a lot of design questions along the way. And at pretty much every turn, we went to the more generic rather than the specific. And the reason for that is that well, we've done now several global scans for multi-solving, and we find it everywhere we look at, like from the sub-neighborhood to the multinational scales. People are multi-solving, and we find it in every sector. We find urban orchards and distributed solar and home weatherization and massive ecosystem restoration projects, anything you can imagine. And so what multi-solving has in common are these attitudes and approaches rather than the specifics. And so we want flower to serve all of those points of conversation. And so that's why the categories for benefits are broad and kind of generic, so that this will be as useful, we hope, in a neighborhood or in a boardroom. And flower's new. It hasn't even been fully released to the world yet. So we have a lot more to learn about that. But I think the rules for fostering good conversation are the same ones for any kind of conversation, right? It's go slow, take time, listen, and be curious. So I hope that addresses your question a bit. What else, Kelsey?
Looks like our next question comes from Keely, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but will flower be free to use when it becomes available?
Yeah, thanks for that. We are still finalizing our thinking about that. Our philosophy, the thing that let me start with what we're committed to. We're committed for flower to always being free to use for people from the most disinvested, marginalized communities. So whatever scheme we come up with, that's going to be a given. We do see the potential for people using flower within work that they would do for pay. And we would like to set up some structure to share the wealth of that, really to be able to continue to develop flower and add new features. So take the energy that comes into it. Whether we're going to do that as a donate what you can or some kind of licensing structure, we're learning a lot about IP options right now and trying to figure that one out.
Thank you. So our next question comes from Leah. Is there any community of practice forming up around this by any chance?
Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot, Kelsey, but I wondered if you would like to talk about our practitioner circle for a minute.
Sure. And I was going to say we've actually got some practitioner circle members here with us. So thank you all for joining as well. But in a lot of the research that we did before with Susie Moser and Tina Smith, I'm not sure if they're on the call or not. One of the things that came up is that multi-solvers oftentimes feel lonely in this work. And so one of our goals as an institute was to create a space where people could share more about the work that they're doing and also connect with others to find that sense of community. So that is an ongoing community that we are constantly evolving and creating alongside with our practitioners. So if you have any interest in participating in that, I will drop my email in the chat and you guys can email me to let me know that you're interested.
Great. I'm kind of scanning the chat too, Kelsey. Also, we have a pretty small group here, so I would just, if anyone wants to unmute yourself and just name a question, I think we can do that too. All right. Well, it's also been almost 90 minutes. I bet people are ready to get on to their next thing, but I'll just say thank you again. Thanks for giving us a chance to share flower and our excitement about it. And thanks for your feedback. Bye, everyone.
Hey, Beth,
Hey.
how are you doing? I put in the chat, but it's probably ran by an example of what I call devil in the details. There is a bike path proposal in Lebanon now to connect Sachem Village to Dartmouth Hitchcock. Rec department likes it, and others. I have to stop because I need to give Judith a car key.
Oh, the suspense. So how about you follow up with me afterwards?
Yeah, it's in the chat somewhere, but
Okay.
I will
Thank you.
follow up.
Great. All
We have
right.
We also have really quick,
Oh.
one more question from Monica Wright in the chat. Big question is about tracking impact. Without data, it's very challenging to understand if intended outcomes are happening or if a shift is needed in tactics. If the data needed does not exist, should we jump into solutions or should we be looking to collect that data needed? And so the main question is, would there be a way to evaluate or indicate that more data is needed to make a decision or evaluate a benefit?
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm understanding the question, but it sounds to me like this is a question about what I named about what 3/4 of the way through our time, that this question of where to set a slider, like how big is that benefit, isn't always known by the group of people assembled. Sometimes it's knowable, but requires research. And sometimes it may not be knowable because it requires, sometimes it requires delving into the research that already exists. Sometimes it might require research that hasn't even been done yet. I don't know all the answers to this, but I'll tell you a few things of my thoughts. The first one is, if you agree with my assessment that we're moving into a increasingly destabilized period, movement, but not moving is a choice as much as moving forward in the best direction that we can with the information that we have, which is another reason why Flower has been designed to be flexible and generic, to enable that kind of moving with the best knowledge that we have, as opposed to the most number of decimal points of precision that we can have. My teachers in systems theory emphasize learning as being really important. So when we don't have the data, I think we can be explicit about our guesses, and we could use Flower to do that. We can design our metrics for how we're going to learn. We can connect with others who are doing similar experiments. And so that's part of the thinking behind our practitioners circle. And we can ask, what are the no regrets directions to move? Like sometimes what I find is, say, working with communities, that they want more and more precision to be sure, because things feel so precarious and destabilized, and it feels like safety is in detailed numbers. But safety can also be in what's something that's going to be likely good for this community no matter what. And so by starting to show more and more benefits, that's part of how we and time will tell if our hypothesis is right about this, but loosen up a little bit of that kind of frozen feeling for the lack of knowing every last detail with maybe as much precision as we could hope. Happy to, whoever that question came from, I'm really interested in this and happy to talk more if I'm not quite getting at the heart of what you're asking.
Beth, if I could finish that story quickly.
Absolutely. What's happening, Phil?
The bike path that's being proposed by the Recreation Department and other groups would take the bike path from Sachem Village to Dartmouth Hitchcock through the Boston lot, with its wildlife corridors, wetlands, ups and downs, huge construction costs. So if that was the bike path proposal, obviously the Flower would give a very different answer. Just saying that there always are the ifs. And you know, in our case, for that bike path proposal, wouldn't be so good.
Yeah, well, we knew it, so it's great to have a real life example. Thanks, Phil. I mean, we knew in setting up these quote seed ideas and playing along with this imaginary place that we weren't really giving you full information. And I would hope most cities would have more. You know, my hope would be that it would help the good people of Lebanon wrestle with that dilemma, because we're faced with these trade-offs in all directions. One of my systems thinking teachers, my mentor, Danella Meadows, you know, said that part of the point of making the systems we grapple with explicit is so we can have better conversations, because a lot of arguments are because I'm assuming one thing and you're assuming another. And having an object like Flower, we don't have time for unproductive conversations anymore. And I hope Flower can accelerate some of this. Elizabeth,
Definitely.
I see your hand up. Thanks, Phil.
Hi, thanks. How do you make sure that the participants have the knowledge, skills, and abilities and experience necessary to be providing the data and making the decisions and providing the environmental credit built up over a lifetime of having, you know, kept their carbon footprint minimum to 0 to minus, so that they actually are the ones who have been proven that they can be the stewards of the government, of the land, of the procedures, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. I've helped create lots of tools for decision supports over a lot of different years of my career. And in my view, like, tools are never the answer. The answer is building the capacity of people to use tools well. So that's part of what I hear in your question. I think that in complex systems, there are many experts in particular domains, and part of where we're stuck right now is that no one domain can find the way forward, right? So I could have a lifetime of knowledge of climate, but if I don't really have full understanding of public health, then I'm not necessarily going to find the wisest decision. So I think at least what we're trying to do with Flower, and not every tool or every process is like this, is bring people together in a way that their collective intelligence improves, rather than what seems pretty common, what degenerates or something. The quality of the conversation actually gets poorer. But that comes partly from the tool. A tool can nudge us towards that, but partly through skills and training, and why I wish we had more time to talk about the multi-solving way, because these best practices we see of multi-solvers is partly about how to bring our expertise together in productive ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, you guys are loyal multi-solvers. Thank you so much for sticking around for the full hour and a half. And to be continued, and we'd love to hear from you. So best of luck with all your work.
And best to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.